subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. Help promote and rank up my channel. So today we're going to be reviewing a horror comedy, Vicious Fun. A film that apparently came out in 2020, but is only now getting released on like Shudder Films as a Shudder Films original. It was showcased in film festivals. I'm not sure how many. But the logline on this one is insanely interesting. Joel, a 1980s film critic for a national horror magazine, finds himself unwittingly trapped in a self-help group full of serial killers. With no other choice, Joel attempts to blend in, or risk becoming the next victim. This is directed by Cody Calahan, also writer Cody Calahan, Evan Marsh, Amber Goldfarb, Ari Millen, if I said that right, Julian Richings, Robert Malliot, Jane Beck, I'm not sure. I'm sure I'm butchering this stuff, and David Koechner. Let's go ahead and talk about the positives on this film. The positives on this one, it has a really interesting, unique premise. The opening scene sets the atmosphere and sells you a very convincing 80s film. From the amazing score to the horror magazine writer that's kind of like a Fandango writer, and the retro set dressing. I was impressed by directing from the start. Following this guy packing his bags at his motel room to his car, to creeping on a girl at a payphone. The 80s tone and vibe in here, it just feels so goddamn convincingly authentic. The music is absolutely amazing. The character Joel, the lead, he's a little bit unlikable until he gets shit-faced drunk. And the laughs just ensue, and the comedy does ramp up. A lot of character growth over the course of the movie. Joel is just your typical cliche in love with a woman he can't be with, kind of wants to find a way to force it to happen, force it to work. She's shacking up some other dude. They're roommates. He follows this dude, and from then on, everything just starts to flow really well. And all these serial killers at this kind of self-help group that he stumbles into are reflective of other serial killers that have had their own movies. Like Bob is a representation for like American Psycho. You've got the stealthy cannibal that eats people. Got the cold, calculated killer that likes to dress like a clown when it comes game time. Harry, who has her own mysteries surrounding her. Got Mike the dumb brute. And Zachary, somewhat a leader. So each one of these characters really pop off the page. They all have their own personalities, their own wacky sense of doing things. And even when you get to like just the normal characters in the movie, like the cops, they're pretty hilarious, but I mean, they really stand out. All three of the cops, one of them is very different from the other two. He's kind of that horror lover. Film does get a bit meta. Soundtrack, absolutely great. There's blood, gore, kills, chills. A lot of humor. It's more so a comedy than a straight-up horror film. Standout performances in here. The guy that plays Bob, the guy that plays Joel, these guys really impressed on screen. In comparison to everybody else, they really stood out. They really brought life to these roles. All the characters on screen are interesting.
They got really messy. I like it messy sometimes.
Anyways, let's talk about the negatives. The cops are really dumb in this movie, and there's nothing wrong with it, like story-wise, but the believability of it, they just come off as complete idiots in here. So stupid, so silly. I think is absent these three police, as they state, like everybody's out cleaning up the mess. It's just a little bit of a stretch. Joel can be a bit irritating, can be a bit of a wet blanket. A moment in here where somebody gets a limb cut off and they don't scream or anything. It's the way it's written. It's not the actor's fault, the performance-wise. It's just the way it's written that it seems unbelievable that somebody wouldn't scream. Not a lot of creative or inventive kills. The premise of this film about the whole self-help group is quickly ditched in favor of your typical run from the killer type situation. It could have been much more interesting if they dove deeper into him trying to pretend to be a serial killer, trying to pretend to be a part of the group, because these guys were barely explored. Fritz, he comes off pretty inconsistent. With the way he's talking, it makes it sound like you're going to deal with some really formidable opponent. You're going to deal with somebody that calculates and predicts everything, because that's the way he acts, that's the way he behaves. But that persona is quickly ditched to embrace this wacky clown one. Of himself, though, he's very charismatic and all that. He doesn't really do much in the serial killer department, and that's one of the negatives on this film. It doesn't really dive deep into exploring these characters, their tactics, their roots. It does explain some of them, but the way this film goes about it, it ditches a lot of the most interesting stuff to become a casual film. Considering where it goes, you definitely could build prequels or sequels to this. There's mysteries surrounding certain characters. Certain characters do go on to do other things, and the roots of some of these characters could really be explored and fleshed out. They didn't do a lot with it in this film, but they could do a lot more with it.
Thanks so much for coming out.
Overall, I would give it a 6 out of 10. It's really entertaining. I really love the 80s film vibe. I love comedy horror. I love the 80s setting. I really like the premise. I wish the movie wouldn't have ditched it so fast, because that's what hooked me, that's what drew me in, the premise that it kind of just throws away. So fair warning, if you're going in this based off that premise, know that it kind of becomes something else. However, this could become its own kind of Marvel Cinematic Universe with what they established and set up in here. Some of it's pretty far-fetched. Really entertaining movie for the most part. Not all the comedy works. Not all the scenes do well. There's not a ton of kills, surprisingly, for a movie with so many serial killers in it. But it is interesting, original, and fun. It is vicious fun. Like, subscribe, comment. 6 out of 10. Let me know your thoughts and opinions. Stay awesome. Rock on.